Mama Jennifer didn't just admire her daughter's husband, she claimed him as her own. She thought she could steal companionship without consequence, but she forgot that the comfort you take from your daughter's bed becomes the isolation you die in. The story opens on the afternoon Amara's scream splits the silence of the village compound. The house smells like Sunday rice and betrayal, and the air is thick with the kind of heat that makes secrets impossible to keep. While Stella is in Lagos building the business that feeds them all, Mama Jennifer sits on her bed pulling a wrapper over her bare shoulders, with Wisdom, her son-in-law, scrambling for his trousers beside her. The intro establishes Mama Jennifer's fatal flaw, predatory loneliness. She cannot bear to watch others, even her own daughter, possess the security and masculine attention she lost when her husband died. 3 years before Amara's scream, Stella brought Wisdom home for the first time. He arrived in a black SUV that kicked up enough dust to announce his arrival before he stepped out, and when he did, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a watch that caught the afternoon light, Mama Jennifer felt something she hadn't felt since her husband's funeral. Not desire, not yet. But recognition. This was the kind of man who made a woman feel secure. Stella glowed with the particular pride of a daughter who has chosen well. She'd been running her event planning business for 2 years, building something real in Lagos, and Wisdom owned a logistics company with 3 trucks and dreams of expansion. They sat in Mama Jennifer's parlor drinking malt, and Wisdom spoke in the confident, measured tones of a man who knew his worth. "Your daughter is a very hard-working woman, Ma," he said, his voice respectful but warm. "She doesn't need anyone to take care of her. But I want to anyway." Mama Jennifer smiled and nodded and said all the appropriate things mothers say when their daughters bring home suitable men. But beneath the smile, something cold and calculating was taking inventory. The watch. The SUV. The way he sat, legs spread slightly, comfortable in his own space, the posture of a man who had never doubted his right to take up room in the world. Her late husband had sat like that once, before the sickness. Before the slow, humiliating decline that had left her a widow at 43 with 2 daughters and debts she couldn't name in polite company. "He's perfect," she told Stella later, after Wisdom had left and they were washing dishes together. "You've done well." And Stella, who loved her mother despite everything, who sent money every month and paid for Amara's school fees and bought the wrapper Mama Jennifer was wearing, Stella beamed and said, "I know, Mama. I really know." What Stella didn't know was that her mother had already begun measuring Wisdom against a different template. Not as a son-in-law, but as a solution to a loneliness so profound it had started eating through the walls of propriety that normally kept such thoughts contained. The wedding was 6 months later. Beautiful. Expensive. Mama Jennifer wore gold and smiled for the cameras and felt, for the first time in years, the specific jealousy of a woman watching someone else begin a story she wished was still hers to live. The business started failing in the 2nd year of the marriage. Wisdom's trucks, his pride, his proof of manhood, began breaking down one after another. First the transmission on the Hiace. Then the engine in the flatbed. Then an accident that totaled the pickup completely, and the insurance payout was a fraction of what he'd expected. Stella tried to help. She offered to loan him money from her business account, suggested consolidation strategies, even offered to connect him with some of her corporate clients who might need logistics. But every offer fell to Wisdom like another confirmation that he'd become the smaller partner in his own marriage. "I don't need your money," he'd say, his voice tight with a pride that was turning rancid. "It's our money, Wisdom. We are married. You think I don't know that? You think I don't feel it every time your phone rings with another client, another contract, another success?" He'd stand at the window of their Lagos apartment, looking out at the city that had promised him everything and delivered humiliation instead. "I used to be somebody. Now I'm just Stella's husband." She tried to soothe him, to build him back up, but Stella was busy. Events don't plan themselves, and her business had grown faster than she'd anticipated. She was often out before dawn, home after dark, her phone a constant buzz of logistics and last-minute crises. She loved wisdom, but she was also building an empire, and empires require sacrifice. Wisdom felt the sacrifice. He felt it in the empty apartment, in the dinners he ate alone, in the bed where his wife arrived exhausted and left before he woke. And somewhere in that feeling, a door opened, not dramatically, but with the quiet click of a man deciding that if he couldn't be successful, he could at least be somewhere that made him feel like he was. He started visiting the village. "Your mother shouldn't be alone so much," he told Stella. "I check on her when I'm not busy." Stella, grateful for any sign that her husband was thinking of family instead of stewing in his failures, encouraged it. "Thank you, baby. She gets lonely. And Amara is always at school." So Wisdom drove to the village, where the pace was slower and the expectations lower. Where Mama Jennifer, beautiful, available, grateful, waited. The first visit was innocent enough. Wisdom arrived on a Saturday afternoon claiming he was in the area visiting a supplier. Mama Jennifer welcomed him with the kind of hospitality that borders on performance. She'd cooked jollof rice and chicken, set the table properly, changed into a wrapper that showed off the figure she'd maintained through sheer vanity and village gossip. "Stella didn't tell me you were coming," she said, smiling as she served his plate. "She doesn't know. I wanted to surprise her by checking on you." He looked around the compound, at the swept yard and the well-maintained house that Stella's money had renovated. "You keep the place nice. A woman alone has to." Mama Jennifer sat across from him, not eating, just watching. "It's hard sometimes. The loneliness." And there it was, the first thread pulled. Not a lie, but a truth offered at an angle that created space for something else to grow. They talked for hours that day. About Stella, at first. Then about his business troubles, which he admitted with a vulnerability he couldn't show his wife. About her late husband, whose memory Mama Jennifer invoked not with grief but with a widow's particular brand of nostalgia that focuses less on the man and more on the feeling of being needed. He started coming every week. Then twice a week. The meals got more elaborate. Mama Jennifer started wearing makeup on the days she expected him, started paying attention to details she'd let slide for years, her nails, her hair, the way she moved when he was watching. "You should come more often," she said one evening as he was leaving. "It's nice to have a man around the house. Makes me feel safe." Wisdom looked at her in the dying light of the compound and saw something he needed desperately, a woman who looked at him like he was essential rather than optional. Who served him food instead of asking him to pick up dinner on the way home. Who had time to listen to his problems instead of checking her phone mid-conversation. "I'll come back soon," he promised. And he did. Again and again, each visit lasting a little longer, the conversation getting a little more intimate, until the village stopped being a refuge and started being something else entirely. Something neither of them would name out loud but both of them understood perfectly well. Amara, home from school one afternoon, noticed her mother humming while she cooked. "Why are you so happy, Mama?" Mama Jennifer smiled at her youngest daughter and said nothing. But in that smile was the seed of everything that would come after. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon during the rainy season. Wisdom had driven to the village ostensibly to fix a leaking roof, a task he'd volunteered for with an eagerness that should have been suspicious but wasn't, because Stella was too busy to notice the pattern forming. The rain started while he was still on the ladder, sudden and heavy the way harmattan rains come. He climbed down soaked, and Mama Jennifer met him at the door with a towel and something in her eyes that had moved beyond hospitality into territory that had no innocent name. "You catch cold," she said, standing too close, the towel in her hands an excuse for proximity. "I am fine." But he didn't move away. He stood there, water dripping from his clothes, looking at this woman who was his wife's mother and also something else, something that had been building in the space between their conversations, in the meals and the compliments and the particular way she looked at him when Amara wasn't watching. "Stella doesn't know how lucky she is," Mama Jennifer said quietly. "To have a man who still shows up." who still tries. She's busy building something. I understand that. But who's building you? Her hand was on his chest now, ostensibly steadying herself, actually feeling his heartbeat through the wet fabric. Who makes you feel like a man instead of a bank account? He should have stepped back. Should have recognized the moment for what it was, a line that once crossed would redraw the entire map of their lives. But wisdom was tired of feeling small, and here was someone offering to make him feel large again, and the rain was loud enough to drown out the voice in his head that was screaming for him to stop. He kissed her. Or she kissed him. Later, neither would be able to say who moved first, only that the movement was mutual and hungry and carried the particular desperation of two people trying to fill voids in themselves with flesh that didn't belong to them. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Mama Jennifer smiled. You feel it too, she said. Not a question. A confirmation. This can't happen again, Wisdom said, but his voice held no conviction. It won't, Mama Jennifer agreed. They were both lying, and they both knew it. The door had been opened, and doors, once opened, are much harder to close than people pretend. The affair became a routine draped in deception. Wisdom would call Stella from the road, his voice easy and casual. Baby, I'm going to check on your mother. She mentioned the generator was acting up. Stella, grateful and distracted, would thank him. You're so good to her. I know she appreciates it. What Stella's mother appreciated was the particular way Wisdom had learned to touch her in the darkness of her bedroom while Amara was at school. What she appreciated was the fiction they'd constructed together, that this was somehow about companionship, about two lonely people finding comfort, rather than what it actually was, a betrayal so profound it had its own gravity, pulling them deeper with each encounter. Mama Jennifer stopped going to church. The pastor's sermons about honoring your family felt too pointed, too specific, and she couldn't sit through another message about integrity without feeling the weight of what she was doing. She told people she was busy, that the walk to church was too far for her aging niece. The women of the village noticed her transformation. She'd started wearing makeup on weekdays, had bought new wrappers, walked with a lightness that widened the gap between her age and her behavior. Mama Jennifer is looking younger these days, they whispered at the market. She's happy. Maybe she's found someone. They didn't know how close to the truth they were, or how terrible that truth was. Meanwhile, in Lagos, Stella worked herself harder, trying to make up for the distance she felt growing in her marriage. She planned bigger events, took more clients, came home later. She interpreted Wisdom's frequent village visits as renewed family commitment rather than abandonment. She thought she was building their future when actually she was giving him the space to destroy it. The lies multiplied with the ease that lies do when no one is looking too closely. Wisdom told himself he was just getting his confidence back, that once his business turned around he'd stop this madness. Mama Jennifer told herself she deserved this happiness after years of widowhood, that Stella was too busy to notice anyway. But someone was noticing. Amara, 13 years old and home from school more frequently as exam season approached, had started paying attention to the patterns. The way her mother disappeared into her bedroom when Brother Wisdom visited. The way the house smelled different after his truck drove away, like cologne and something else she was too young to name but old enough to know was wrong. She said nothing. Not yet. But she was watching. And in a small village where secrets live in close quarters with the truth, watching was only the first step toward knowing. Amara wasn't supposed to be home that Thursday. She had choir practice, a commitment she'd kept faithfully every week since joining the church youth group. But the choirmaster's wife had gone into labor, and practice was cancelled with only a text message's notice, a message Amara received while already on the bus home. She arrived at the compound in the late afternoon to find Wisdom's SUV parked in its usual spot, poorly hidden behind the building in a way that suggested guilt rather than discretion. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that holds its breath. Amara knew, In the way children know things before they have language for them, that something was happening that she wasn't meant to witness. She should have announced herself, called out, made noise. Instead, she moved through her own home like a thief, each footstep deliberate, heading toward her mother's room where she could hear low voices and something else, sounds that made her stomach turn even though she couldn't name them. The door was ajar. Just barely. Enough for a slice of light to fall across the corridor, enough for a 13-year-old girl to see her entire world collapse into something she would spend years trying to unsee. Her mother. Her brother-in-law. The wrapper on the floor. The terrible, undeniable geometry of betrayal. Amara's scream came from somewhere deeper than her lungs. It was the sound of innocence dying in real time, of a child's faith in the fundamental goodness of her family shattering against the reality of adult selfishness. Mama Jennifer scrambled for the wrapper, her face shifting from pleasure to shock to something worse, defensive anger, as if Amara were the intruder, as if this child had somehow violated their privacy by coming home to her own house. Wisdom was faster, already pulling on his trousers, his face white with panic. Amara, wait. But she didn't wait. She ran. Out of the house, across the compound, toward the neighbor's fence where she collapsed, sobbing, while behind her the two people she trusted most tried to construct an explanation for something that had no explanation beyond pure, selfish evil. Perhaps you know what it feels like to discover something that changes everything you thought you knew about the people you love. That moment when the ground opens and you realize you've been standing on a foundation that was never solid. If this story touches something you've survived, stay with us. The hardest part is still ahead. The neighbors heard Amara's crying and came running. Mrs. Okoye found the girl caught at the base of the fence, her school uniform dusty, her face streaked with tears and something deeper than tears, the kind of grief that ages a person instantly. What happened? Are you hurt? Mrs. Okoye knelt beside her, hands already checking for injuries. Amara couldn't speak. She could only shake her head and point back toward the house, where Wisdom's SUV was already pulling away too fast, kicking up stones, fleeing the scene of a crime that had no legal name but felt like murder nonetheless. Mama Jennifer appeared in the doorway, her wrapper hastily tied, her hair disheveled in a way that told the entire story to anyone who knew how to read it. She saw the neighbor kneeling with Amara and understood immediately that the secret had escaped, that the careful construction of lies had collapsed in a single afternoon. Amara, she called, her voice trying for maternal authority but landing somewhere near desperation. Come inside. Now. But Amara wouldn't move. She stayed at the fence, protected by Mrs. Okoye's presence, while her mother stood in the doorway of a house that had become something else, not a home anymore, but a crime scene. Mrs. Okoye was not stupid. She'd lived in the village for 43 years and had witnessed every variety of human weakness. She looked at Mama Jennifer's appearance, at the timing of Wisdom's departure, at the depth of Amara's distress, and understood. Jesus, she breathed. It's not what you think, Mama Jennifer started, but the words died when she saw Mrs. Okoye's face, not shock, but confirmation. As if she'd suspected and now had proof. That child needs to be with someone safe tonight, Mrs. Okoye said, standing, her arm around Amara. She'll stay with me. She's my daughter. Then you should have remembered that before you destroyed her family. Mrs. Okoye's voice was cold, final. She led Amara away, and Mama Jennifer stood alone in her compound as the sun set and the village began to whisper. By nightfall, everyone knew. The bush telegraph of a small community is faster than any social media, more relentless than any news cycle. And by morning, Stella would know too. Because Mrs. Okoye, for all her discretion, understood that some secrets are toxins that only grow more poisonous when kept. She called Stella herself. Your sister needs you to come home. Today. Don't wait. Stella arrived on Sunday morning, her car cutting through the early mist like judgment arriving ahead of schedule. She'd driven through the night after Mrs. Okoye's call, her mind racing through possibilities, accident, illness, something fixable, something that made sense. She hadn't slept. Couldn't sleep. The fear that sits in a mother's heart when her child is in danger had metastasized into something sharper when she realized it was Amara who needed her, not her mother. The compound was quiet when she pulled in. Too quiet. None of the usual Sunday morning bustle of families preparing for church. Just silence and the smell of yesterday's cooking and something else, tension so thick it had texture. Mama Jennifer came out to meet her. She'd rehearsed this moment all night, had prepared explanations and justifications and appeals to mercy. But when she saw Stella's face, exhausted, worried, still innocent of the knowledge that would destroy her, all the words collapsed. "Where's Amara?" Stella asked. "At Mrs. Okoye's house." "Why? What happened? Is she sick?" Mama Jennifer opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. "We need to talk." Something in her mother's tone made Stella's stomach drop. She followed Mama Jennifer into the house, and the walk from the car to the parlor felt like a funeral procession, slow, inevitable, heading towards something that couldn't be undone. They sat. The same chairs where wisdom had first been welcomed 3 years ago. The same room where they'd celebrated the engagement, the wedding plans, the granddaughter Stella was hoping to give her mother someday. All of it hovering in the air between them like ghosts. "Tell me," Stella said. And Mama Jennifer, who had spent her whole life constructing explanations for her choices, who had always been able to twist narrative until she emerged sympathetic, found that there was no way to dress this truth in anything but its naked ugliness. "There's been a situation between me and wisdom." The words hung there. Stella's face didn't change, not yet. The mind needs time to process certain truths. It has to turn them over, examine them from multiple angles, confirm that yes, those words mean exactly what they seem to mean before the reaction comes. "What kind of situation?" "We've been close. Closer than we should have been." The silence that followed had weight. Had consequence. Stella sat perfectly still, her hands in her lap, her face blank. And in that blankness was the beginning of an explosion that, once it started, would level everything in its path. The explosion came slowly, then all at once. Stella stood up. Sat down. Stood up again. Her hands moved without purpose, reaching for her phone, her bag, the table's edge, finding no anchor in any of them. "Close," she repeated, her voice flat, processing. "You and my husband have been close." "Stella. How close?" Mama Jennifer looked at her daughter and understood that evasion had ended. "Very close." The sound Stella made wasn't a scream, it was deeper, more primal. The sound of a soul cracking. She pressed her hands to her face, and for a long moment the only noise in the room was her breathing, harsh and irregular, like someone drowning in air. When she lowered her hands, her eyes were dry. Shock has a way of moving past tears into something colder. "How long?" 6 months. 6 months. Stella laughed, and the sound was broken glass. 6 months. While I was working. While I was paying for this house. While I was sending money for your food, your bills, her voice cracked. "Were you sleeping with him?" The question sat between them like a weapon. Mama Jennifer's silence was answer enough. Stella's hand moved fast, a slap that snapped Mama Jennifer's head to the side, that echoed through the quiet house like a gunshot. Neither woman moved after. They sat in the aftermath of that violence, both breathing hard, both understanding that something had just shifted that could never shift back. "Where is Amara?" Stella's voice was different now. Cold. Decided. "I told you. Mrs. Okoye's. Get her. I'm taking her with me. You'll never see either of us again. Stella, please. You're dead to me." Stella stood, gathering her things with mechanical efficiency. Whatever you were before, my mother, my family, that person is dead. I keep sending money for the house because it's in my name and I won't let you make me cruel. But you don't exist to me anymore. She walked to the door. Stopped. Turned. Did you even think about me? For 1 second. Where you were, she couldn't finish. Couldn't say it out loud because saying it would make it too real. Mama Jennifer sat in her chair, her cheek still burning from the slap, and had no answer. Because the truth was no, she hadn't thought about Stella. She'd thought about herself, her loneliness, her needs, her desire to feel wanted again. She'd thought about everything except the one person whose happiness she was supposed to protect above her own. Stella left. Mrs. Okoye brought Amara to the car, the girl's face swollen from crying. As they drove away, Amara looked back once at the house where she'd grown up, and Mama Jennifer stood in the doorway watching her family disappear. The village was watching too. From windows and compound gates, they witnessed Stella's departure, and they knew. By evening, the whole community would know. By tomorrow, the church would know. By next week, everyone Mama Jennifer had ever known would know that she had done the unspeakable. And she would spend the rest of her life learning that some doors, once you walk through them, lock behind you forever. The first week after Stella left, Mama Jennifer told herself it would pass. That her daughter would cool down, that Amara would miss home, that wisdom would, what? Come back. Defend her. She realized with cold clarity that she had no idea what she'd expected from him. He never called. Never visited. The affair that had felt like salvation revealed itself for what it had always been, two people using each other to avoid facing the emptiness in themselves. When the convenience died, so did the connection. By the second week, the church elders came. 3 of them, sitting in a parlor with faces arranged in expressions of pastoral concern that couldn't quite hide the judgment underneath. We've heard troubling things, Sister Jennifer. She'd almost laughed. Sister. As if she was still part of the body when she'd cut herself off from every healthy organ. We think it's best if you step back from fellowship for a time. Until you've sorted things with your family. Step back from fellowship. The kindest possible words for excommunication. She nodded, agreeing to her own exile, and watched them leave with relief. The village children were less kind. They threw stones at her fence and sang songs their mothers had taught them about women who forgot shame. She stopped going to market. Food came from her garden, cassava and okra and whatever grew without needing much care. Stella's money still arrived on the first of every month, deposited directly to the account that covered the house bills, and every transaction felt like alms given to a beggar. The isolation was total. Worse than widowhood because at least widows receive sympathy. This was something else, the particular hell reserved for people who commit sins the community cannot forgive because they violate the most basic rules of kinship and care. One evening, 6 months into her exile, Mama Jennifer heard music from the neighbor's compound. A party. Dancing. Celebration. She stood at her window and watched through the gaps in her fence as families gathered, children played, women laughed together. She thought about Stella, probably thriving in Lagos, having cut out the cancer that was her mother and moved on. She thought about Amara, who would grow up without a grandmother because the grandmother had chosen momentary comfort over permanent relationship. Most of all, she thought about wisdom, not with longing, but with the bitter understanding that he had gotten to walk away mostly intact. Men usually do. While she sat alone in a house that had become a tomb, he was probably rebuilding his business, maybe dating someone new, certainly not sitting in darkness counting the cost of his choices. The curse wasn't supernatural. There was no ancestral spirit, no juju, no mystical punishment. The curse was simpler and more terrible. She would live. She would grow old in this house, fed by the daughter she'd betrayed, pitied by the community she'd scandalized, and she would die alone having learned too late that some hunger, when fed, only grows stronger until it consumes everything you thought you were keeping safe. In the neighbor's compound, a child laughed, high and clear and full of the kind of joy that only comes from being surrounded by people who love you properly. Mama Jennifer closed her window and sat in the dark, listening to life happening somewhere else, to someone else, and understood that this endless echo of celebration in other people's houses, was the shape her remaining years would take. The comfort she'd stolen from her daughter's bed had become, exactly as promised, the isolation she would die in. And there was no one left to blame but the woman in the mirror, who had mistaken loneliness for license and forgotten that some doors, once closed, are closed from both sides forever.